From stealth missions to attacks on more sophisticated Axis vessels, the Royal Navy submarines beat impossible odds and proved their worth time and time again to ensure the Allies' triumph. But alas, history has been so unkind. Their stories remain largely overlooked and buried, just like the ships they sank. Today we'll be remedying this malice by diving deeper than the Titanic to reveal the legacy of these unsung heroes. Get ready to see Britain's submarines in a whole new light as we give them the credit they've long deserved. Do you think it's sad how the British submarines during World War II were buried under the success of surface vessels like the HMS King George V? I mean, sure, the mighty vessel played a pivotal role in sinking Germany's Bismarck, but without Britain's underwater titans, the Axis would have easily taken Malta and kept their supply chain. Unlike the Americans and Japanese, who designed their submarines for Pacific operations with a focus on long-range and larger vessels, the British tailored theirs for the European theater, especially in the Mediterranean. For much of the interwar period, Britain's submarines were large, often 80 to 90 meters long, displaced 2,500 tons submerged, and had a trademark casemated gun mounted high on a raised platform. But that's not exactly what made them so special. No sir, not even close. In the 1930s, when the construction of oversea patrol submarines declined, the Admiralty decided to build new, sophisticated boats to replace the underperforming Oberon, Parthian, and Rainbow classes. And would you blame them? German U-boats were running rampant at the time. Submarines were sunk on all corners of the ocean throughout the world, and many to this day haven't been found. The O, P, and R classes wouldn't have stood a chance as they were large, slow, overcomplicated, and too mechanically unreliable. But the T class, on the other hand, a breath of fresh air. They fixed many of the issues from the three classes and extensively played major roles in the Navy's submarine operations during the Second World War. Apart from being heavily armored with torpedo tubes, some of the T-class boats also had deck guns for surface combat. Plus, many of the Group 2 boats were further modified for effective long-range patrols in the Far East. Ballast tanks were changed into fuel tanks, thereby increasing the fuel load, surface range, and speed. Yes, the T-class suffered heavy casualties, but it's only because they were, in fact, one of the classes that bore the brunt of the Second World War. For example, 13 boats were lost in the Mediterranean, but they also sank 13 enemy submarines, 6 Italian, 4 German, and 3 Japanese. One of the most successful T-class submarines of the Royal Navy during World War II was the HMS Turbulent, N98. Launched in 1941, the submarine gained fame for its extensive operational history in the Mediterranean, where it sank a considerable number of Axis ships and disrupted enemy supply lines. Similar to other T-classes, Turbulent was designed to meet the requirements of 3 things. 1. An extremely large forward torpedo salvo capability, long patrol endurance for operations in the Pacific against Japanese warships. And finally, they needed to comply with the various treaty restrictions. However, just as you'd expect, these challenging requirements led to several compromises. Group 2 boats like the Turbulent, for instance, had their external bow tubes moved further back, allowing for a finer bow shape that ended speed loss. Additionally, 2 of its external torpedo tubes were reversed to face aft, along with an added rear torpedo tube that gave it a unique hump. In terms of juice, the T-class boats supported different diesel engines depending on where they were built. Those from the Royal Dockyards used Admiralty diesel engines, while Vickers-built boats had Vickers engines. Even the pre-war Scots boats had German-manned supercharged diesel engines. Yet, it's safe to say the Vickers diesel engines fitted to the majority of the T-class boats were the best. Despite being less advanced than the diesels used by the German U-boats, Vickers could continue running even if one cylinder failed by disconnecting the cylinder from the crankshaft. When you add that to the fact that the Turbulent had its fuel capacity increased and could go 4,500 nautical miles at 11 knots and 15 when surfaced, what's there not to love? The armaments? Nope. It had 2 external forward-facing torpedo tubes, 6 forward-facing 21-inch tubes inside, 6 reload torpedoes, a 4-inch deck gun, and 3 anti-aircraft machine guns, all of which were crucial for a terrain as difficult as the Mediterranean. With calm, shallow, and unusually clear waters, especially when compared to other regions like the North Atlantic, one might think the Mediterranean was a sea of dreams, but it was very difficult to fight in. Subs plying the route were easy to spot from the air. even when submerged, and the shallow waters either made deep diving escapes difficult or downright impossible. And like that wasn't hard enough, remember when we mentioned the T-boats were designed for operations in the Far East? To accommodate this, the T-boats were made to be large, significantly more than standard German Type 7 U-boats, making them more vulnerable to detection in mines. But it wasn't all bad. The large size of the T-class boats gave them amazing endurance and greater range compared to the smaller standard Royal Navy submarines like the S and U classes. At the end of the Mediterranean campaign, however, 13 T-class submarines were lost, with 7 of those coming from the Axis minefields. But in return, they denied supplies to the Axis in North Africa, which ultimately led to Allied victory in that theater. 4 Victoria Crosses were even given to T-class submarine crews, including J.W. Linton, captain of the Turbulent. It raised some eyebrows for the fact that it was awarded for sustained effort and not for outstanding bravery in a single action. But I say it was worth it. His aggressive approach and leadership ability were instrumental in ensuring the submarine's continued success during its patrols. In total, Turbulent sank or damaged over 90,000 tons of Axis shipping, including 6 Greek sailing vessels, 9 Italian merchants, the German ship Creta, the auxiliary submarine tender Benghazi, and many others. It also damaged the Italian tanker Posa Rica and a cargo ship Nino Bixio, the latter of which was carrying more than 3,000 Allied prisoners of war. In addition to sinking ships, Turbulent operated out of Malta, and there it intercepted and destroyed numerous merchant ships attempting to bring supplies to Rommel's Africa Corps. Sadly, only 2 of the Type 2 boats survived the war, and the HMS Turbulent was not one of them. It was lost during a patrol off the coast of Italy in March 1943. Until date, the exact reason is still up for debate. Some war historians believe it struck a mine, while others think it was sunk by Italian depth charges. Despite its loss, however, the Turbulent remains one of the most celebrated British submarines of the war. Only a few could match its success and effectiveness in the seas of battle, and one of them in particular was the HMS Splendid, P228. Being part of the S-class, Splendid was designed to patrol the restricted waters of both the Mediterranean and the North Sea, but boy was she packed with a lot of goods. With a length of 217 feet and a beam of 23 feet 9 inches, Splendid could displace 865 long tons on the surface and 990 when submerged. For surface running, she was juiced by 2 950 brake horsepower diesel engines, each driving 1 propeller shaft. Just like the HMS Turbulent, Splendid could reach speeds of 15 knots on the surface, but she was slightly faster underwater with 10 knots. On the surface, her range was just as good. She could go 6,000 nautical miles at 10 knots and 120 when submerged. But if you're not thrilled by that, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that the Splendid was armed with a 3-inch deck gun, 7 21-inch torpedo tubes in the bow, and 1 external tube mounted in the stern. Given she also carried 6 reload torpedoes for the bow tubes, that's a total of 14 torpedoes altogether. Coupled with the Type 129 AR or the 130 ASDIC and the 291 early warning radar, it's easy to see why the Splendid was a winner during the Second World War. But alas, she had the rockiest of starts. After completing her training, Splendid left Holy Loch on the 3rd of October 1942, alongside her sister ship, HMS Sybil. 10 days into the journey, she spotted smoke at midday and pursued the unknown vessel only to find out that it was an Allied vessel. Gaiska simply delayed. Later that day, the submarine spotted a U-boat but couldn't identify it and chose not to attack. Before the month was over, she'd already encountered several mechanical problems with her aft diving planes, forcing her to return to port and abandon the patrol. Thankfully, her next patrol in January 1943 was much better. After 4 days, she dropped off 2 Special Operations Executive agents on the island's eastern coast before being redirected to patrol off Naples. On the 15th of January, she spotted an Italian convoy and fired 5 torpedoes at the merchant ship Emma, which was carrying 950 tons of supplies and 10 tanks. The next morning, Splendid was back into action once again, this time firing another torpedo and sinking the ship. After evading a brief depth charge counterattack, she also sank the Italian minesweeper Cleopatra, damaged the armed trawler Violette, and sank another merchant ship, Commercio, all on the same day before returning to Algiers. From her first Mediterranean patrol in November 1942 until her sinking on the 21st of April 1943, the HMS Splendid became the most successful British submarine in terms of tonnage sunk between Operation Touch and the surrender of Axis forces in Tunisia in May 1943. Throughout her service, she sank 8 Axis ships and an Italian destroyer, totaling 25,243 GRT. Impressed? Well, you should be. Splendid was exactly what her name portrayed, and more. But like many war heroes, she never made it to the very end. You see, while Splendid departed Malta on the 18th of April 1943 for what would be her final patrol off Naples, little did she know she'd be meeting her Waterloo. Barely 3 days later, the German destroyer Hermes detected the submarine's periscope and located her using sonar. After dropping 41 depth charges and 3 attack runs, Hermes forced the British boat to dive to 500 feet. Worse, the last barrage caused leaks in the pressure hull, forcing the submarine to surface. Hermes opened fire, killing 18 crew members and wounding the commander. To prevent capture, Splendid was scuttled, and the surviving crew were taken as prisoners of war. Miraculously, despite the degree of his injuries, including losing an eye, Commander Ian McGosh successfully escaped from captivity and returned to England. Fascinated by the splendid heroics of the HMS Splendid, though? Just wait till you hear about the HMS Upholder, P-37 of the U-class. At the start of World War II, U-boats, along with the S&T, were not only the most sophisticated classes in the British fleet, but also one of the most advanced classes in service anywhere in the world. They had a riveted steel hull half an inch thick for dives to 200 feet, and internal fuel and ballast tanks. But they were quite simple. They featured internal torpedo tubes in the bow, and unlike some later classes, they had no external tubes. This design kept things efficient, but meant the submarine had limited supply of torpedoes. However, that's precisely where the HMS Upholder shone the most, and gained uniqueness from other subs in its class. She was one of 4 U-class submarines that had 2 external torpedo tubes at the bows, in addition to the 4 internal ones fitted into all boats. Why, you ask? Well, the reason why the tubes were kept outside was because of the bulge they created at the bow in prior boats. It generated a large bow wave and interfered with depth keeping at periscope depth. As far as pros come, the U-class submarines were smaller than many other types, and this gave them a crucial advantage in hunting convoys and evading enemy counterattacks. Their smaller size allowed them to maneuver easily in confined water, such as the Mediterranean Sea, where larger vessels like the Turbulent struggled. Additionally, the compact size of the Upholder made it have faster diving times and perform better in stealth operations. Alas, it wasn't perfect. For all their strengths, the U-class boats only had 4 internal tubes and 8 torpedo tubes. Compared to other subs, Upholder also had limited offensive options, and would have often needed to return to base to rearm. Finally though, as coastal submarines, the U-class boats had shorter ranges, especially when compared to the larger ocean-going vessels. That being said, it's the difficult seas that make sailors worth their salt. Similar to J.W. Linton's heroic captaincy of the Turbulent, the Upholder was led by a brilliant mind. In her entire career, she was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Malcolm David Wanklyn, who led her to becoming the most successful British submarine of the Second World War. During a patrol off the coast of Sicily in 1941, he spotted the heavily escorted Italian troopship Conte Rosso, a liner carrying over 2,000 troops to North Africa. Despite being in clear sight of the Italian destroyer escorts, Wanklyn audaciously ordered the attack. With only 3 torpedoes available after 1 misfired, he was still able to score 2 direct hits on the troopship, sending the Conte Rosso to the bottom of the sea. He was awarded the Victoria Cross for that unprecedented assault on the well-defended convoy. In total, she completed 24 patrols and sunk in excess of 90,000 tons of enemy shipping, including 4 warships, 2 submarines, 10 merchants, an auxiliary minesweeper, 6 cargo ships, the destroyer Libisio at the Battle of Duisburg convoy, and much more. She also damaged the Giuseppe Garibaldi, the German freighter Duisburg, the French tanker Capitaine Damiani, and the Suryo. Personally though, one of the most mind-blowing feats of the Upholder is the fact that she sank 2 trooper ships within hours of each other. Yep, that's right. She was the one who brought down the mighty sister ships, Neptunia and Oceania. Alas, Upholder was lost with all hands on her 25th patrol, in what ironically should have been her last before returning to England. On the 12th of April 1942, she was ordered to form a patrol line to intercept a convoy along with the HMS Urge and HMS Thrasher. but it's hard to tell if she even received the signal. Like the Turbulent, her loss has raised debate and a handful of interesting theories worth dissecting. Some believe that she was sunk by a mine near Tripoli, while others allege that she was downed by an air and surface attack by German aircraft. However, given there's no official Axis record to support this claim, it's safe to take that theory with a pinch of salt. The third theory for her loss is that she was spotted by a reconnaissance seaplane and was attacked by depth charges dropped by the Italian torpedo boat Pegaso, northeast of Tripoli. Yet Canadian naval researcher Clayton Alexiades begs to differ. After closely examining British records, he believes that the submarine couldn't have been in the positions where these attacks were claimed to occur. Rather, he opines that it's more likely that the HMS Upholder was lost on a mine as she was on her way to intercept the Montreal Union convoy on April 13th. A probable route would have taken her close to an Italian minefield laid by the destroyers Giovanni de Verrazzano and Alves de Mosto in May 1941, a few miles north of Tripoli. Despite the haziness surrounding her loss, though, please take nothing away from the submarine. She was loved and praised for her good works, including the credit of sinking almost 100,000 tons of enemy shipping, as earlier stated. It's no surprise that the Admiralty waxed lyrical in her tribute, saying the ship and her company are gone, but the example and inspiration remain. And with that, we close the curtains on the legacies of some of Britain's most amazing World War II submarines. If you loved this fascinating chapter of naval history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be in the loop when we release a new video. But while you're here, ensure you grab a snack while sailing through the rest of our channel for more fascinating insights into naval warfare and the innovations that shaped it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.